Before you hear another word, I want you to imagine this: a single father, unarmed, running straight into gunfire, not to save himself, not even to save his child, but to save a wounded police officer he had never met. And beside him, a dog who refused to leave his side. What they did in those next few minutes didn't just save a life, it changed an entire police department forever. If stories of courage, loyalty, and unexpected heroes move you, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel, because this is one you'll carry with you long after it ends. The sirens started just after sunset. Mark Ellison had just finished washing dishes in the small kitchen of his modest home on the edge of town. At 38, life hadn't gone the way he'd planned. 5 years earlier, he'd buried his wife, Hannah, after a sudden illness that tore through their world like a storm. Since then, it had just been him, his 8-year-old daughter Lily, and Ranger, the German Shepherd mix Hannah had insisted on adopting from the shelter years before. Mark worked long hours as a mechanic. His hands were always scraped, his back often aching, but he never complained. Every spare ounce of energy he had went to Lily. He braided her hair in the mornings, badly at first, but better with practice. He learned how to pack school lunches with notes tucked inside. He attended every parent-teacher meeting, sitting in chairs too small for him, listening carefully. That evening, Lily was at the dining table finishing her homework while Ranger lay at her feet. The house was quiet, peaceful, ordinary. Then came the sharp cracks. Not fireworks, not a car backfiring. Mark knew that sound. Gunshots. They echoed from just a few streets away, followed by screaming tires and the rising wail of sirens. Ranger's ears shot up. Lily froze, pencil hovering above her worksheet. "Daddy," she whispered. Mark's chest tightened. He moved quickly to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to see flashing red and blue lights reflecting against houses down the block. Another round of shots rang out, closer this time. "Get down," he said firmly, moving Lily away from the window. On the floor. "Stay behind the couch." His heart pounded. He grabbed his phone and dialed 911, but the line was already flooded. Busy signal. Outside, chaos unfolded. A patrol car screeched to a halt at the corner. An officer jumped out, taking cover behind his door. Across the street, a suspect armed with a rifle fired wildly, bullets shattering windows and ricocheting off pavement. Mark's mind screamed at him to stay inside. Protect Lily. Lock the doors. Wait. Then he saw it. The officer, young, maybe late 20s, went down. A shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him backward. He hit the pavement hard, his weapon skidding out of reach. The patrol car door swung open, useless as cover now. The suspect advanced. There are moments in life when time fractures. When instinct and fear collide. Mark didn't remember deciding to move. He just did. "Lily, stay down. Do not move," he said, gripping her shoulders. No matter what happens. He didn't wait for fear to talk him out of it. He ran. Ranger bolted after him without command. The night air was thick with smoke and the metallic scent of gunfire. Neighbors were screaming from inside their homes. Mark sprinted low, using parked cars as cover. Bullets snapped through the air, one shattering a side mirror inches from his head. The officer lay exposed in the open street, struggling to crawl. "Hey," Mark shouted at the suspect, waving his arms. "Over here." It was reckless. It was insane. It worked. The gunman turned his weapon toward Mark. In that split second, Ranger launched forward with a force Mark had never seen before. The dog barreled into the suspect's legs, knocking him off balance. The rifle discharged wildly into the sky. Mark reached the officer, grabbing him under the arms. "You're not dying here," Mark grunted, dragging him toward the narrow gap between two houses. The officer was bleeding heavily, his face pale. "Why?" he gasped. "No time," Mark said. Behind them, the suspect struggled as Ranger clamped onto his forearm, teeth locked, refusing to release despite the man's punches. It bought seconds, precious seconds. Other officers arrived in a thunder of sirens. Commands were shouted. A taser fired. The suspect finally collapsed, subdued. Mark didn't even notice the moment the gunfire stopped. He was too focused on pressing his hands against the officer's wound, applying pressure like he'd once seen in a first aid class. "Stay with me," he kept repeating. "Stay with me." Paramedics swarmed in. They lifted the officer onto a stretcher. Only then did Mark feel his legs shake. A senior officer approached, eyes wide. "Sir, you ran into an active shooting." Mark nodded toward Ranger, who trotted back to him, panting but unharmed. "So did he." The wounded officer survived. The bullet had missed major arteries by inches. Doctors later said that without immediate pressure on the wound, he likely would have bled out before they arrived. News spread quickly. By morning, headlines called Mark a hero. Footage from a neighbor's security camera showed him sprinting through gunfire, Ranger charging the suspect like a trained K9. The truth was, Ranger wasn't trained for police work. He'd been adopted from a shelter at 2 years old, nervous and skittish. It had taken patience and love to help him trust again. At the hospital, the young officer, Daniel Ruiz, asked to see Mark as soon as he was stable. When Mark entered the room, Daniel tried to sit up despite the pain. "You saved my life," Daniel said, voice cracking. Mark shook his head. "We just did what anyone would do." But everyone knew that wasn't true. The police department held a ceremony weeks later. Officers lined the courtyard. Medals gleamed in the sun. Mark stood awkwardly in borrowed dress clothes, Lily clutching his hand. Ranger sat proudly at his side, wearing a custom badge on his collar. The police chief stepped forward, voice thick with emotion. "In my 25 years of service, I have never seen bravery like this from a civilian." Mr. Ellison ran toward danger without hesitation. And this dog, this incredible animal, prevented further loss of life. The entire force stood and applauded. But what shocked them most wasn't just that Mark had risked his life. It was why. When reporters asked him later what went through his mind, he didn't talk about courage. He didn't talk about instinct. He talked about Lily. "I couldn't let her grow up in a world where people look away," he said. "I want her to know that when someone's life is on the line, and you can help, you do." That moment rippled through the department. Officers later admitted that burnout and cynicism had been creeping in after years on the job. Seeing a civilian risk everything for one of their own reminded them why they wore the badge in the first place. Daniel Ruiz recovered and returned to duty. On his first day back, he stopped by Mark's house, kneeling to hug Ranger before shaking Mark's hand. Lily watched from the doorway, pride shining in her eyes. Life eventually returned to something like normal. Mark went back to fixing engines. Lily kept doing homework at the kitchen table. Ranger resumed his favorite spot at her feet. But something had shifted. Mark realized that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about choosing love over fear. Choosing action over comfort. Choosing to step forward when everything inside you tells you to step back. Years later, Lily would tell her friends about the night her dad ran into gunfire. Not with dramatics, but with quiet certainty. "My dad says heroes are just regular people who decide someone else matters more than their fear," she'd say. In Ranger, he became something of a local legend. The department even created an honorary K9 award in his name, given to service animals who display extraordinary bravery. But the greatest impact wasn't the medals, or the headlines, or the applause. It was the reminder that ordinary people carry extraordinary strength within them. That love, for a child, for a stranger, for what's right, can overpower even the sound of gunfire. So if this story moved you, if it reminded you that courage still exists in this world, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because sometimes the most powerful heroes aren't the ones wearing uniforms. Sometimes they're single dads with scraped hands, racing through the dark, with a loyal dog by their side.